Welcome back to 30 Flirty and Panicking, your go-to podcast for embracing the unexpected and building a life you love. I'm Kelsey, and today we're sitting down with Today lifestyle editor and debut author, Francesca Cocchi, whose new rom-com, Have a Great Summer, is officially out in the world. In this conversation, Francesca pulls back the curtain on what it really looks like to write and publish a book, balance a creative dream with a fast-paced full-time career, and trust that your timeline does not need to look like anyone else's. So if you're flirting with the idea of starting a side hustle, pursuing a creative dream, or finally bringing an idea to life that you have been thinking about forever, this one's for you. Let's get into it. Francesca, I'm so excited to have you on 30 Flirty and Panicking. I have the privilege of knowing you from within the walls of 30 Rock and our Today Show family. But for anybody who doesn't know you and is meeting you for the first time, can you set up a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, Kels, thank you so much for having me because I'm really excited. And I remember when all of this first started coming about for me, I came downstairs and gave you a copy of the book because I just had a feeling that you would really connect with it. So I'm really excited that we're getting to chat about it. But yeah, my name is Francesca, and I have been working in media for almost 10 years at national outlets. And of course, that's how we know each other. But this year, actually in May, my debut novel came out. It's called Have a Great Summer. I have a copy right here. And this, I love, and you actually have the arc there, which is like the early copy. So you have
I always feel special when I see it.
They made a couple changes in the final copy, but I always feel like the people who have the OGs, they're like the real ones who have the arc.
I have to hold it tightly.
Yeah. So, I've always been a writer and an editor and a journalist, but I really always wanted to write fiction, and that was something that in my heart I really wanted to do. I wanted to write a book. I was an English major. Growing up, I was always writing stories, writing creatively. But, life kind of takes you down a certain path, and I have had an amazing career in journalism, and I still do. But it was just something in the back of my mind that I still always wanted to write a book. It was a dream to write a book before the age of 30. I just kind of had this idea in my head back when I thought 30 was so old and so far away.
We understand that concept well here.
Yeah. So, but yeah, then when I was 27 and I was about to get married and I was planning my wedding, I had the idea for the premise of this book, Have a Great Summer, which is about a wedding writer who gets laid off from her dream job at a bridal magazine in New York City, and she gets kind of sent packing back to the Jersey Shore where she grew up, where she gets roped into covering the wedding of her high school crush, Sebastian, who she has not seen in 15 years. So I started writing in 2023, and it took me about a year. I finished it in August of 2024. And then, I felt like it was a book that reminded me of books that are out there right now, books that are popular in book clubs, beach reads. And I felt like I maybe had a unique perspective with the Jersey setting because I grew up 10 minutes from the beach on the Jersey Shore. And I just decided, let me see if there's any interest in publishing this. Reached out to literary agents, and yeah, I wound up signing with an agent pretty quickly. And then I actually wound up getting a 2-book publishing deal. So this book just came out in May, and then my second one is going to be coming out next summer. So it's been a whirlwind, but it's been so amazing. And the book's only been out for a little over a month, but the reception has been amazing, especially in like the community in New Jersey where I'm from. So
I understand why it is the ultimate summer beach read. My family was laughing at me because my sister can read 100 books in 100 days. I do an inch at a time. So I'm giving it 10 minutes a day. And this I took with me to the beach for a weekend and finished it. And both my mom and sister were like, you need to give it to us. We don't see you read like that.
oh my God, I love to hear that.
Yes, I'm excited to get into more about it. Every book obviously starts with a great idea. And I'm wondering if you'll share a bit with us about how you really came up with the idea for Have a Great Summer.
Yeah. So, I had the idea for essentially like the opening scene, the opening chapter. And, it doesn't really give anything away because you read it right away. But there's sort of like an outrageous run-in that happens. Lena, the main character, is a journalist, and she's at the city clerk's office, like trying to get some paperwork for a story. But she runs into Sebastian, who's there with his fiance, and they're applying for their marriage license, and they forgot to bring a witness. So they need a witness. And Lena kind of like is trying to hide in the background, but of course winds up getting roped into it. And that's kind of that premise I got that idea while my husband and I were at the city clerk's office in Hoboken applying for a marriage license, which is such a not romantic experience. So much about wedding planning is not really romantic and is more like administrative.
Yeah.
And so basically, we applied for our marriage license. And then, of course, there was the whole like, okay, who's going to pick up the paperwork? Did you check and make sure everything's good to go? And my husband wound up being the one who picked it up. He's like, "Oh, yeah, everything's fine." And then, of course, like, as we get closer to, because it's like you have to do it a little bit before the wedding. And then I remember like checking over before when we were actually packing to bring everything to like go home and do the actual trip for the wedding. And I
Yeah.
was like, Matt, there's a typo on this. But it was like very minor. I think it was like a misspelling in one of like my last name, but in the section with my parents' info, something like that. But it made me nervous, and I was like, I don't want anything on this paperwork to like not be right, because then
Right.
you could have the wedding and it won't even like be valid. You got to go do the paperwork again, whatever. So we had time. We wound up going back to the office, getting it fixed. But that was what kind of like sparked the idea. I was like, well, what if the typo was like a bigger deal, or what if it was like the wrong name altogether? And it sounds so outrageous, but it really reminded me of those early 2000s rom-coms that I love and that I can tell you love by the title of this podcast.
Yes.
But so many of those movies were about weddings. I loved like 27 Dresses and The
The
Wedding
best.
Planner, and Father of the Bride. And I just feel like there's so much material with weddings. And at the time, weddings were such a big part of my life. I was planning mine, but then I was also going to weddings like every other weekend. And my friends joked that my husband and I were like professional wedding guests. So I was
Yeah.
like, okay, I feel like I could really lean into this in a way that's really specific to like people our age. At the
Mhm.
time I was writing, I was like 28, 29. And I feel like I had a lot of like specific things I could reference to make it feel like just really relatable. So I decided to just really lean in and make her a wedding writer. She has like this column that kind of has a following down the shore, about like real weddings. And New Jersey weddings are also a whole separate species of weddings. So
Right.
it was really fun to like lean into that, and have the main character be someone who her own love life is not really much to write home about, but here she is. She has to write about love every day. And then what happens when her career kind of crosses path with like her own history, her own love life. So yeah, that's kind of how the whole idea came about.
I love it. I think so many people have dreams of becoming a published author one day, and it's a very different thing to have an idea and to know that something could be really good versus taking action and actually taking the leap. What made you say, "Okay, it's time, and I'm actually gonna take this seriously and try to write this?"
It's such a good question. I think I had to be patient and wait for the right idea. That was definitely part of it. I had
Yeah.
some other ideas over the years that I would kind of, start and stop. But I know when I got this idea, I kind of like couldn't stop thinking about it. And I feel like
Yeah.
those are always the best ideas. I was like, I literally can't get this out of my head. And I was so busy. I was like switching jobs, moving, just got married, but I still couldn't stop thinking about it. And it took me like a year to actually sit down and start writing after I first got that idea. But I was like, "You know what? Once I felt a little more settled and like I had the time." Another thing was that as I've gotten further along in my journalism career, I'm actually writing less, and that has kind of been a bittersweet thing for me. It's like, you want to make it and you want to keep moving up. And I love editing and I love managing and I love editorial strategy, but my first love is writing. So
Right.
it became a way for me to bring that love back to life, on kind of my own terms. And so I got a processing software called Scrivener. And I think that helped too, because it was like not the software I was using for work. It wasn't a, Google Doc or a Word doc. It was like a special system that I paid $50 for, but it just felt like I made a little investment in
Yeah.
made it feel a little bit more serious, a little bit of like a kind of special application that I opened just to do my creative writing. And then, yeah, I kind of just did the math and realized that if I wrote between 200 and 300 words a night, I could have an 80,000 word manuscript in a year, which is the average length of a novel. And that just felt more manageable too. So I think breaking it down helped, and I didn't try to force myself to write, whole chapters or really, really, you know, huge chunks of text in a single sitting. I just tried to chip away at it and write a little bit more every day. And then a year later, I had a full story. So I think sometimes you have to break things down. But, it's the same as if you're like training for a marathon or doing something, like you have to have smaller, more manageable goals like or along the way that make it feel achievable.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you don't have a low key job. You work in a very fast paced environment.
As you
Were
know.
there days when you came home and you were like, I just can't? Or was it like, were you adamant about making sure you did it every single day?
Yeah.
How did you kind of balance the two?
Yeah, it's not like I was like, "Oh my gosh, like no matter what I have to do this." Because I never wanted it to feel like a chore either, you know?
No.
But I did want it to feel like a daily part of my routine, like the norm, you know? Like if I'm having a
Yeah.
normal day, then it's part of my routine. And so I really made an effort to like write every night starting at like 8 p.m. on the couch with my dog, had kind of a little ritual, would get home from the city, make dinner, and then sit on the couch. Some nights I would make it till 9 p.m., but some nights I would keep writing and writing, and all of a sudden it would be 11. So I really tried to not put a lot of pressure on it, but I did want it to feel like a habit that was serious to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that really helped. And at the same time I think balance is key because I didn't want to be, saying no to other things that make me happy and kind of like fill my cup up, you know? So like I still made sure I was getting my monthly dinner with my girlfriends. I still was making sure that like my husband and I had time to do the things we wanted to do, whether it was like, go try a new restaurant or have dinner together. So I think there's sometimes where, you have to think about whatever your passion is in the realm of your other priorities in life. And you don't want to necessarily like stop doing all the other things that you love and that make you happy, because I think that's how then you start to actually not feel good about whatever the passion is, right? Like I didn't want it to take away from life. I wanted it to like add to it, and it actually brought me so much joy and creativity and happiness. I felt like I was actually more productive at my day job and happier because I was getting this kind of other fulfillment from something else, and it kind of
Yeah.
was a nice way to be like, my day job is wonderful, but it doesn't have to be everything. I can
Yeah.
get some of the other things I'm looking for out of my creative writing. So that's kind of how I approached it. Yeah.
I understand that entirely. You actually kind of just answered my next question. I feel like we live in this world where the side hustle is continuing to grow and more people are taking something else on. And I think especially if you are an ambitious person or you do have a passion, it can be hard to like put it down and
Yeah.
take the steps necessary to avoid burnout. And I was going to ask you your advice to anybody who might be struggling to establish that balance or ensure they're taking the time for themselves.
I think it's hard because I think I am kind of like a hustler at heart, and kind of like, I don't think anybody's gonna make these dreams happen for me. I feel like I have to make them happen. Even I feel like the writing was interesting because it was almost more solitary and private. And actually I didn't even tell my mom about it, and we're so close. I didn't want to tell people and get their hopes up because I feel like, it's like, oh yeah, I'm writing a book. And I was like, well, who knows if this is gonna turn into anything. So it was
Yeah.
really just my husband and like a few friends. And eventually I told my sister. During that time, I feel like I wasn't really feeling any burnout because it felt so kind of like small and like specific to me. And it wasn't like a lot of outside pressure, outside voices. I think where you need to think about it more is just when it gets to the stage that you're ready to like release it into the world. So when the book came out in May, I took a little bit of time off work. I went on a book tour, and now we were chatting before we started recording. I've been doing a lot of events, book events and signings on the weekends, and doing things with book clubs at night. So trying to kind of squeeze it all in, and then on top of that, I'm on deadline for edits for the second book, and also a lot. When you're an author, you have to do a lot on social media to like promote your book and get the word out. And many people who have found out about this book have found out about it because I post silly little TikToks about how much I love New Jersey and how I wrote a whole
Yeah.
book about it.
Yeah.
um, but I think I kind of just try to really check in with myself and make sure that I'm always prioritizing like the thing that this is really all about at the end of the day, and like for me, it's about like these stories that I want to write. And like if I feel like there's a week where it's like the social media of it all is taking away from that, then I scale back on it. And so I think if you kind of just keep in your mind, like, okay, but like, why am I doing this? What do I love about it? What is bringing me like joy? And the other things can hopefully like be supplementary. But at the end of the day, you got to just make sure that like that reason that you first started doing it is still there. So I feel like a lot of it is like it's a mindset thing. And it helps to have people around you who know that too and can check in with you, like I feel like I have my husband and my mom and my sister and people who have been like cheering me on from the start and can kind of also like, keep me honest about it too and remind me that I don't have to say yes to everything. Because I know that can be hard too, when you're first starting out, you just feel like you're so grateful for every opportunity. You want to say
Right.
yes to everything, but you have to make sure that like the things you're saying yes to align with what your goals are and, that kind of thing. And if you don't have time for everything, it's okay. And you can like give yourself grace for that.
Yes. Sometimes easier said than done, but so important. That's very good advice.
Definitely.
I like to think of 30, Flirty, and Panicking as a toolkit. And I hope each person that's just listening right now is able to walk away with kind of a new skill or piece of information that can help them to build lives that they're excited about. So, for the people who do have dreams of becoming a published author one day, I would love to get on a more granular level into what the process of taking this idea and actually ending up where you are now, which is not only with a published debut novel, but also a second book on the
Yeah.
way. Will you walk us through, like, from beginning to where we are now, what this
Yeah.
publishing process was like?
Yeah, absolutely. I've learned so much, just in the short time I've been doing this because I do feel like it's kind of this whole world that it's almost like veiled in mystery and you might not really understand how it works. And even working in media, it's like a related industry. We cover books, but being on this side was very different. So, yeah, so when I finished the manuscript, I knew that the next step, because I wanted to have the book be traditionally published, the
Right.
next step usually is to get representation from a literary agent. So that process is called querying, and you send a query letter out to agents that you think might be interested in representing your type of book based on, some agents have like wish lists on their website, or you can see the other titles that they have on their list. So I did some research and I was kind of looking for agents who sometimes they'll even say like I'm looking for the next Carly Fortune or I'm looking for the next Emily Henry. And I kind of this was kind of started as a joke but has actually become kind of serious now, but I kind of was pitching myself as like, well, I want to be the Ellen Hildebrand of the Jersey Shore because I feel like
Yes.
there's so many beach reads about Nantucket and Cape Cod and other areas, but I just felt like Jersey needed a different representation that's like different than what you saw on MTV.
Right.
And so I felt like there was like a hole in the market for that. So when I was setting up my query letter, which is basically it's like a little cover letter where you just have a 3 or 4 paragraphs about yourself, a kind of elevator pitch for the book, and why you think it would be a good fit for this certain agent that you're reaching out to. So I kind of tried to make sure I was hitting those important things, like you don't have to summarize the entire plot of the book, but you have to kind of in a very succinct way get across like what makes this book different, but why it's also a fit with what's working in the market right now. So you have to have comp titles, like reference other books that are popular right now to show that you're paying attention to like what's selling and everything. So yeah, I kind of framed it up as like a book that's for fans of Emily Henry and Carly Fortune and Ellen Hildebrand, but with a really specific New Jersey setting that could potentially resonate with like a community that hasn't seen it represented very widely necessarily in like beach reads. And then I also kind of set up the premise and the connection to like really popular rom-coms and how it's kind of a continuation of that, and it is also dual timeline, which is really popular right now. But the past timeline takes place in 2009, which was so fun for me to write because
What an era.
it was like Alex and Ani bracelets and, like you're listening to Boys Like Girls on your like chunky MacBook iTunes and the
Yes.
technology, like you have an iPhone, but it probably doesn't have internet. You're just like texting. So I tried to kind of just like communicate what those little differentiators were about the book and my voice and kind of like the perspective that I have.
Yeah.
And then I sent the queries out to like maybe 8 different agents, and I was like, all right, going back to life. I might hear from these people in 6 months. Maybe I'll never hear back from them. And I like went to work the next day, and I think within like 48 hours, I started hearing back from agents. And that
Wow.
was when I was like, oh, wow, okay, I actually might have something here because normally it takes like a very long time to hear back, or
I
you
would
might not hear
think.
back at all. Yeah. Um, But the next step is that if agents like your pitch and like the sample pages you send, sometimes you only send like 10 pages. They
Yeah, so you
ask
would write
you.
this letter and then you would include like a little sample.
Yeah. So every agent's a little different, but some of them only want to see like 10 pages or the first chapter. A couple wanted to see like 50 pages, but the vast majority, yeah, they just want to get a quick little taste of like your voice basically. And then they'll say, hi, like I'd love to see the full, which means like they want to see the full manuscript. And so the first time I got an email that said that, I was like, I like dropped my phone. I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. And so I wound up having like probably like 7 or 8 agents read the full manuscript, which is a lot. And then like a couple weeks later, one of them reached out to me and like invited me to meet with him in New York and like was really interested. And that was such a surreal moment because, like I said, this had been a really private thing that I hadn't even told a lot of people about. I think I wound up showing the manuscript to like 4 people before I sent it to agents just to like get a little bit of feedback. But it was like my husband, my sister, my good friend who works in marketing at a publisher, and then like another friend at work. And that was it. And I was like, I'm not going to show this to anybody else. But like those people were, they knew me. They weren't going to be like, this is terrible. But they were like very encouraging. They were like, oh my gosh, this totally reads like a published book. It reads like something that I could have like, you know, picked up to read at the beach. So you should like pursue this. But this was the first time I was hearing from, like a professional person who like was reading it because they wanted to be involved. And I just remember like the first thing he said was like, I loved your book. I loved it. And I like cried. And he
Of
was
course
like,
you did.
he was like talking about my characters like they were real people. I was like, I made these people up on my couch.
That must have been
um,
such a wild feeling.
it was one of those like core memories that I feel like I'll just be able to like play back in my head forever because especially like as a girl who just grew up reading and like loved books and was like writing in my journal and just to have that moment was wild. And yeah, he was like, I just feel like this is exactly the kind of book that's popular right now, and you have a little bit of something different going on with the setting and with the age of the characters and like really leaning into the millennial of it all. And he was like, I want to go on submission and I want to get this out and like see what people's appetite is for it. So basically like signed with him, which basically just means that he's going to represent me. And then he's the one who, the next step is going on submission, which is, the process of the agent bringing your book to editors at different publishers who might be interested in then acquiring the book to publish it. So I think I signed with him in September and we went on submission in October. So it all started happening really fast.
Yeah.
This was 2024. And so the first round of submission, we got a lot of really nice feedback, but a lot of it is about like timing and, like that certain editor needs to have room on their list for like another book next summer. And they can't already have like a beach read that's like a similar vibe that's going to compete. So there are like a lot of factors, but we got a lot of really nice feedback, just kind of like wasn't exactly the right fit. And so then kind of let the holidays happen. I was like a little bummed that we didn't get an offer, but
Right.
I was like, and I know you've said this too, like I really feel like timing is everything and I didn't want to rush it. And I was like kind of trying to trust the process there. So then, in January, we kind of came up with a new plan, a new set of editors to pitch it out to. But like I didn't change anything. We kind of just were like, let's try a new batch of people. And that one, just kind of maybe the timing was better after the holidays. We got like more interest that round. And we wound up getting an offer. Basically, like I hopped on a Zoom call with an editor from Kensington, and she was like, I grew up going to the Jersey Shore every summer. And I was like,
Oh,
this
so perfect.
this is the timing, It was just, I just felt like she totally got the sort of like East Coast sensibility of the book. And like, she's a similar age to me. And I feel like she just got everything about it. So it was really such a good fit. And then, during that call, it was with the editor and the director of communications at the publisher. And they do ask you like, oh, do you have other ideas? Like what kind of direction do you see yourself going as an author?
Mm.
And so I remember wanting to make sure that I could talk about more than just this one book.
Right.
But I did already have some other ideas. And so I talked about one in particular, and they seemed to really be like, oh, yeah, like that sounds great. And so then I honestly wasn't expecting this at all. But when my agent called me to say that we got an offer, he was like, it's for 2 books. And I was like, what? And I was like, do they know I only wrote one? But that's like actually more common than I realized, especially if you're writing in a genre, because, you know, with romance, for example, readers are really loyal and they're like really voracious. And so they want to know, what do you have next?
Right.
So I think the publisher, like, I think it was a good sign that it's not just that they wanted this one book, they kind of wanted me and like my ideas. So they wanted to have kind of like a longer term investment in my writing. And yeah, so that was really exciting. And it kind of made me feel like, okay, I could really like do something with this path. And it's not just like, oh, I had one good idea that I was able to sell. It's like, no, like they're really interested in my voice and my perspective and my ideas.
What was it like to get to tell those OG supporters that not only did you get a deal, but you also had a 2-book deal?
It was, oh my gosh, it was crazy. You know, it's one of those times where I feel like I almost like blacked out for some of it because it was so wild. I mean, my family was so excited, and I feel like, and my husband, who was just like there for, you know, like the long nights of writing that are not very glamorous. Like I feel like I used to dream of being a writer, and I pictured like Diane Keaton in like a country house, like, and a turtleneck, like typing away.
Totally.
I was like on the couch in my sweatpants, like with my greasy hair and like,
Right. You weren't like in a cabin in the woods, like by
yeah,
a fire with a
exactly.
glass of red wine. You were like
Yeah. So I
hustling and
think
then going home.
like to tell the people who were there for like the not glamorous moments, you know, to then get to experience the ones that were a little bit more glamorous, and kind of like, I just remember one of the, whether it was when I got the offer from the editor or found out that it was a 2-book deal, I like, my husband was like, okay, I'm going to leave the office right now. Let's go get a drink. Like, just kind of
Yeah.
trying to celebrate like the little wins along the way and the big wins.
It's a
But
huge one.
yes, that was a huge one, but I think I remember us doing that even for smaller things. Like, even if, like, I remember in my mind hitting the 40,000 word milestone was big for me because that was the halfway point. And I kept
Mhm.
saying like, oh, I just can't wait to hit 40K. I can't wait to hit. And I would see the number going up, up, up. And like the day I hit that number and I sent the screenshot, we were like, all right, where are we going? And like, doesn't matter if we were like going across the street to like the local bar,
Yeah.
but just to like mark the occasion and be like, you're making progress on these goals, I think was huge, because it can feel like this big dream, this big undertaking that's like so far off.
Yeah.
But we were kind of like trying to, you know, make the little wins along the way matter too. And so then when the big ones happen, it was even like, it was crazy. We were just like, oh my God. Like, I feel like I had a lot of moments where I was like, is this really happening?
Yeah.
But you know, also the other thing is that one thing happens and then you kind of got to move on to the next thing. So it
Right.
was like so exciting, but then it was like, okay, now we got to have editorial calls. Now we got to talk about marketing. Now we got to talk about the cover. So you almost like get to celebrate, but then you kind of got to move on to the next step in the
Get
process.
back in. Well, to
Yeah.
your point, you wrote the first book kind of at your own pace, even if you had
Yeah.
the general guidelines for yourself when it worked for you after work. And then you come out of this with a 2-book deal. And for your second book, if I'm not mistaken, you had a deadline to hit. So how
Yes.
did that impact your writing process or the way you approached round 2?
You know, I was fortunate that with the first one, I had proven I could write fairly quickly.
Mhm.
And I don't know if part of that is the journalist in me. I'm like, I'm used to deadlines. I'm not super, super precious in the sense that like if I have to cut something and move on, I'll do it for the
Yeah.
greater good. So that made me feel optimistic. But then in retrospect, maybe I was almost too optimistic, because I remember when you get the deadline for the second book, it's like it was so it was like a year ago, and I was like, "Oh yeah, like I could meet that deadline." Then as the deadline got closer, I was like, "Oh boy."
This is a code
So
red.
yeah. Yeah, it I did feel it a little bit. Like I would say, I think my deadline was April 1st of this year for that manuscript, and so from like January to April, especially in the middle of winter, you know, I was like, "Oh man, this is a grind." But I felt like it was doable. And I did feel like, you know, I feel like my publisher is very supportive. And I think if I had needed a little bit more time, I probably could have asked for it. But I was like, you know, I'm going to try to hit the deadline. And I think it wasn't easy, but I was able to get there. And yeah, it is interesting. Like the first one, I didn't owe anything to anybody. It was just me. And now I felt like, okay, I can picture my agent reading it, my editor reading it. I know these people that are going to be looking at this now.
Right.
So that was a little scary, you know. I was like, I felt good about it, and I remember giving it to like my husband and sister, who I knew loved the first one, and I remember they both read it really fast and were like, "We love it, it's great." Like my husband actually likes it even better, but I was still nervous because I was like, "Okay, I have to give it to these professional people." And I breathed like a really big sigh of relief just getting the email from my agent and my editor just being like, this is great. Like it's such a great way to build upon what you started with the first one. And that kind of made me feel good because I think it's normal for authors to kind of wonder like, okay, was this something that I just could do one time, but I can't
Right.
necessarily recreate like the magic of it. But yeah, I felt better once I had that kind of initial like, yes, we're obviously going to make edits and things, but as a whole, this is great, and this is a
Right.
great direction for you to go.
Okay, well, without getting you into trouble, is there anything you can tell us about the second book?
Absolutely. So I'm hoping to announce the title this month. I know the title,
So
and I'm really
exciting.
excited. And actually, the title is a very interesting thing because with my first book and with this one, I pitched the title that I think is going to be the final title, but that doesn't always happen. So I'm excited about that. But I would say for a couple hints, it's Jersey Shore again, but also Hoboken, which is really exciting because I've been living in the Hoboken, Jersey City area for about 10 years. So I really wanted to like be able to represent that area too.
Yeah.
And then if you're into tropes, another hint is enemies to lovers.
Ooh.
And last little hint I'll give is that it is also set in the world of weddings, but specifically bachelorette parties.
Oh, I cannot wait.
Yeah.
You're
So if
speaking
you
to
if
me.
yeah, if you've been going on those trips and you're in those splitwise groups and
The split wise.
yeah, there'll be a lot of little fun references to that.
Oh, I can't wait.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I read somewhere, speaking of the weddings of it all, that you had been to like 30 plus weddings.
Yeah, that I think 30 weddings that even like just my husband and I have been together like in the last few years. Yeah. So I had a lot of material to work with. And this book in general is a lot of art imitating life. I think and sometimes it's interesting like just because people of course will ask how what things or is anything inspired by my real life, and I will say like the plot of this book is fictional. Like this situation is absurd, the premise of this book. This has never happened to me or anybody I know. But of course there are pieces of me, and I think leaning on where I grew up in Monmouth County, New Jersey, which is like a very specific part of the Jersey Shore. It's Central Jersey, which exists, even though people like to say that it doesn't exist. And being able to kind of like capture that experience of growing up in a beach town, beach like shore area, but living there year round. Like I just remember working in restaurants on the boardwalk in Long Branch every summer in high school and having this kind of like realization that a lot of people who came into the restaurant were like on vacation or, and I was like, oh, like this is interesting. So I think that is something I really wanted to capture because a lot of beach reads are, maybe like really aspirational, the place, the setting, or, the house where the people are living is like this crazy house like overlooking like the ocean, whatever. But I really wanted to show what these kids who like grow up in beach towns and ride their bikes everywhere, and like you can't just sit on the beach all day. Like yeah, you go to the beach, but a lot of times you're working at a little boutique or at a restaurant. And specifically kind of like the proximity to New York and just like having these big city dreams and like really wanting to like make it out of your hometown.
Right.
Which is kind of like, a big part of Lena's story is that she got like a little taste of like making it in New York only to have it like taken away. And she kind of feels really stuck in her hometown. But, I actually wrote it from such a place of like nostalgia for my hometown. So I was kind of having like the opposite experience of Lena, like as she comes to appreciate it more and more as the book goes on. That's kind of the feeling that I was having, since I did quote unquote make it in New York, but I've actually been really missing where I'm from at this stage in life. So
Well, it's funny because you touch on that the plot is absurd, like these wild things that happen to her. But I felt like at every turn, there was something about what they were experiencing that I saw in my own life or had experienced or a friend had experienced. And so it was fun to watch that play out. And as you touched on, Lena's obviously covering weddings and her love life at times is a bit lackluster.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to Lena when she needed a little hope about the romantic space?
I've said this at a couple of my events, but I feel like the book is kind of Lena's journey to seeing herself through her best friend's eyes.
Yeah.
And I think something about this book that I really love is that friendship is really like the real love story, in my opinion. And so Lena's best friend, Marin, she's really like a third main character. I didn't want her to be like a flat sidekick. I wanted her to be somebody who had a lot of agency and, really felt like somebody who you could have grown up with, like that kind of like hometown friend who has seen you through all your eras and remembers when you were that like awkward, vulnerable girl in high school and loved you to death then. And
Yes.
like, yeah, maybe now you've kind of figured some stuff out, but she still knows, the people who broke your heart back then, and she's
Oh,
not going to be
yeah.
so quick to forgive them. So yeah, I think my advice would just be that to lean on the people around you who love you, because it's not all about romantic love. There are other types of love that can be so fulfilling, friendships and family relationships. And a lot of times those people, they can see you through many different relationships. And I feel like in my life, I've been with my husband for like 11 years, so that's amazing. But I
Yes.
also have friendships that I've had since I was a little girl, and they've seen me through many eras and heartbreaks and career changes and family stuff. So yeah, I think that when you have to like give yourself some grace and like patience, but you can't take for granted the type of love that you do have in your life, even if it's not romantic.
I love that so much. I was going to say the book so beautifully plays with like teenage nostalgia and adult perspective. What do you think changes about our perspective on like a first love when you're in it as a young kid and when you're an adult and you're able to step back for a minute?
That was what was cool about the dual timeline, because I felt like when I was writing the past timeline, it was so easy to write some of those scenes, because I feel like I have a lot of access to my 15-year-old self. I don't know about you, but like
Yeah.
I can't remember things that happened last week, but I can remember full on conversations or situations that happened in high school. And
Yes.
I think, especially like early high school, those like really formative years. And I feel like it's because at that time, like your world is so small, like your whole world is the restaurant where you work, or your high school, or like your best friend's room where you mastermind like run-ins with boys and like analyze text messages and like try to figure out what you're going to write in their yearbook. So I think in the past timeline, I really wanted to capture that, how like your world can feel like something, whatever's happening, is like the biggest news
Yeah.
in the world. Um, and even like, without giving too much away, like I think as the book unfolds, we find out why Lena and Sebastian haven't kept in touch all these years, because we know that they were friends in the past when they worked together at Sebastian's family restaurant. And so, you're kind of like slowly learning more and more about what happened between them. But I really wanted what happened to feel like something that would have been earth shattering at that time. And I think that's very different than what might be earth shattering now as a
Totally.
30-year-old. And I think when you're 15, the one of the worst emotions imaginable is embarrassment. And I just really
100%.
wanted to like explore that, like what, something that could happen that would like create that feeling of embarrassment and sort of like humiliation. But then like in the present, I wanted like, okay, what happens when this same guy comes back around? But you're at a different place, and part of you is still that 15-year-old, but part of you is, has moved on from that and is, kind of like crushing it at work and has all these great friendships and things. So yeah, I think that it was like cool to see Lena kind of like face these feelings about this same guy, but handle them in different ways. Or you're trying to see, is she going to handle it in a different way? And you know what's interesting too, and the premise of your podcast reminded me of this. I remember I listened to Emily Henry on a podcast like a few years ago, and she said something about how turning 30 feels like a second coming of age. And I just like totally agree with that. That's like how I
Yeah,
felt while I was writing, but it's also how I felt about Lena. And so actually like looking at her at 15 and looking at her at 29, there was almost like so much similarity because you feel like you're on the brink of like a lot of change. Like maybe like a lot of your friends are starting to settle down, or maybe you're considering like a career shift. It just feels like a time when there's like change in the air, and I
big
feel like
time.
that's how the beginning of high school feels too. So yeah, I just feel like it was really cool to see those like moments in her life, flipping back and forth between the two timelines and seeing how things unfold at the different stages, and also like maybe how they're similar.
Yeah, it was very cool for the reader experience too, because I have to say, like, those moments of embarrassment, I was like
Were you
I was
cringing?
so affected by it. Like, I was secondhand embarrassed, and then I'm like, "Okay, I have to move on because we're back in the present now." Like, but you could
I
feel
got you
it.
away
It's
from
like
it pretty quick.
a universal experience. And you're so
Yeah.
right that you hit the nail on the head with that. Well, you just touched on, there's something very 30, flirty, and panicking coded about
Yes.
wanting to have certain things done, or, I think you've mentioned that you were hoping to become a published author by the time you
Yeah.
were 30. Have you ever struggled with those timeline thoughts and pressures? And what's your relationship with timeline?
Oh my gosh, definitely. Yes, I think at this stage in my life, so I'm 31 now and I'll be 32 in November. And my husband and I have been married for 4 years, and we were actually kind of like some of our first friends to get married. And so now we're kind of at that stage where like all the friends who got married after us are like having kids, and we're just like not quite there yet.
Yeah,
And I think that's something that I has been in the back of my mind because I feel like this is another thing that a lot of women can relate to. It's like you feel like you're finally starting to get your footing around this time in your career, and I feel like I'm at an amazing stage in my career, my day job, and then I'm also having all this success with being an author, which I didn't even expect. And
it's
I'm like
crazy.
wanting to soak it all up, but I'm also like, "Oh my gosh, I'm supposed to start thinking about having a family now." And that's where I think, some of it is external pressures. And like, I definitely try to give myself grace and remind myself that like I don't have to feel that way. But I just think that
Mhm.
that's something that a lot of women can relate to is it's like, wow, you like almost like climb this one mountain and you feel so great, but oh, the next thing, you're supposed to be doing something next. So I think that aspect of the timelines has been interesting for me. But I think the fact that I have like a really supportive relationship where we can be honest with each other and like we're very much on the same page. But I remember having a conversation where I was like, "Hey, I want to see this thing through, this author thing. I don't know if I can do that while we're in the middle of like trying to start a family." And I just remember he was like, "That's okay. So then let's focus on this right now." So I think but it's definitely been something, and this is like my first time ever talking about this, Kelsey. So,
I'm
but
honored.
yeah,
I'm
but
honored.
yeah, I think it's like so much of it is just like pressure that we put on ourselves. Is that I don't even really have friends or family who are asking me those questions. I think it's just the little voice in my own head, and I think sometimes that's how it is.
Totally, and just what we consume, and I feel like now
Yeah,
more than ever, you're seeing examples of, I'd say women, but everyone in general, having timelines that work for them, and it's
yeah,
very refreshing to see, like, you becoming a published author on top of working would be a really challenging task, if not impossible, when also trying to start a family, and I say it, like, to the point where I have to stop saying it. I genuinely believe that everything happens the way it's supposed to, and, like, timing is
yeah,
everything, and I feel like
totally.
that when you look back, you always find that that's been the case, so if we could almost just, like, project that forward and just accept that that's the case and it'll happen how it's supposed to, we'd be
I
better off.
agree. I agree. And I think, going back to the title of your podcast, I think there's something about like these timelines where when you make them, it seems so far away. But then, like, here
Totally.
we are, we're in our 30s. I don't feel any different than I've always felt. I thought that I was going to wake up and be 30 and be like ready for all these different things. But I think I've kind of had to have a realization that, like, fundamentally, I, as a person, am not going to change that much.
Right.
And I might get closer to having certain feelings. But it's not as if I'm going to wake up one day and have like an epiphany and I'm ready, and that's okay
Right.
too. So yeah, but
Yeah.
I just think the age that you might have like set a certain goal, it might come faster than you think. And then you kind of have to say, you know what, it's okay. Cause maybe I thought about that timeline and I didn't realize what it was really gonna feel like to be that age and what I was gonna want at that point.
Right, it's almost like the timeline other than, of course, there are, like, biological factors and whatnot, but the timeline, like,
Yes.
can't exist because life just has to unfold the way it's supposed to. It's almost
Right.
like your book writing process. Little
Yes.
things have to happen, and then you arrive where you arrive when you arrive
Yeah.
there. And I don't know
Yeah.
about you, but a part of me still feels like I'm, like, 2009. I'm like, "Wait,
Oh,
I'm pretty sure I'm, like, 20."
no, I love the, like, social media trend that's like, "Oh, she's 22 and I'm also 22, but actually I'm 31." But
Yeah,
it's like,
exactly.
yeah, I think we can contain multitudes in that way, and part of the fun of writing the book was getting back in touch with, like, that side of myself and, like, yeah, like, sometimes I'll be with my girlfriends and I'm like, We're 17 years old." Like, when we hang out
Yeah.
together and, I think it's good to have those people who can kind of bring you back to those other eras of your life and, like, help remind you that you're all of those women at once?
Yes, I
Yeah.
think that's true. I think that's very true. You actually just touched on your husband. I feel like everything you've said about him during this recording has been a green flag. And at the
Yes.
end of your acknowledgments, you referenced that your love story with him is your
Yeah.
favorite. Will you
Yeah.
share a little bit about your love story with us if you're comfortable?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. So we met in college at Villanova. He is a Midwest boy from Illinois, but he's a Jersey boy now because after college we wound up moving in together and kind of like starting our careers in New York. But yeah, he's just like the most supportive, like amazing person. And I think a big thing for me is that, and I don't even think I realized I needed this until we got together, but he, like, lets me shine and is not, like, threatened by that in any way,
Yeah.
and, like, actually, brings him so much joy and happiness to, like, see me shining, and so I think that for me, that is huge because, like, it doesn't feel like we're ever in competition with each other, like, it feels like my wins are his wins and, like, vice versa, but I think feeling like I could take this kind of, like, leap and try something new and try something different, it really helped to feel like I had somebody there for me to like, if I wasn't up for making dinner one night because I wanted to keep writing, like he could pick up that slack for me. So that was really amazing. But yeah, I've joked that like, when you write rom-coms and romance novels, I'll be at events and I'll get questions. I mean, you would be shocked sometimes the questions, but like I straight up have had somebody be like, "Oh, I just saw your husband. He's like a blonde guy." But like, I was so surprised because like the guy in your book is like a Greek surfer. And I was like, guys, it's
You're like,
fiction.
hey, so it's a novel.
But it's so funny. But I was like, come on, I can't be that obvious. Book two is gonna have a blonde guy though. I'll say that. But what's funny about rom coms is like, the characters have to have a lot of like complicated dynamics going on. But, in reality, like my husband and I, like we have great communication and we have a great relationship. And that's not really like fodder for a rom com. Like in the rom com,
Right.
there has to be more ups and downs. So I always kind of joke about that as like, he's better than a rom com guy because he doesn't have all these issues that have to be sorted out throughout the book.
And that's the way you wanna have it. You'd rather
Yeah.
the home life not be novel worthy and
Right.
keep the roller coaster for the book. For anybody who's in the dating world right now or is single, now looking back, you just said you've been together for 11 years. What would you
Yeah.
say are, like, some green flags the single girls out there should look for?
Hmm. That's a great question. Oh my gosh, I've been like I feel like I went from like relationship to relationship, so I feel like I'm not the best like dating advice person.
You don't have to be a
Um
guru for everything. You've just taught us how to publish a book, so it's okay.
but I do think the cliche of just like somebody who feels like a best friend, that's been really true for me. And I read something about relationships recently too, about how like real it was probably a today.com article. But about how like the person that you're with, if there's somebody who you like actually just genuinely enjoy the company of and like sitting on the couch and like doing nothing, I feel like that's like a really good sign because there are going to be like all the big moments in life, the exciting moments, but like the vast majority of your life is kind of like the mundane,
An average day.
Yeah. And I enjoy hanging out with him the way I enjoy hanging out with like a friend. And it's like, it's nice that like we're also attracted to each other and we're also romantic,
Yeah.
but the companionship element reminds me of like the comfort I feel with like a really dear friend. And like when something happens, even if it's like something stupid or something silly, like with our dog or something at work, like he's the first one I want to send a text message and tell about it and like chit chat about it with. So I think like if you're dating and you meet somebody and you start to have those feelings of you're like, oh, I miss this person's company because I just enjoy their presence like as a human. I think that's a really good sign because some of the other things might wear off a little bit. But
Right.
that will always be there if you just feel
Right.
like your energy like brings you comfort. And like we spend a lot of time like, driving together or commuting together. And it's a lot of mundane time, but I feel like we always have like good conversation and just like enjoy being together.
Okay. Very, very strong advice. I will say you sold yourself short. That was very good
Hold it
takeaway.
together.
Very good takeaway. Like I've mentioned, I think so many people sit at home and they have this great idea, but they just haven't taken the leap yet. What would your advice be now that you're on the other side to someone who wants to go for their dream but hasn't been able to really jump yet?
It's a combination of things, but I would say, first of all, give yourself grace if, like we've been saying, the timing maybe just isn't right.
Mhm.
I did get this idea and I kind of sat with it for like a year before I had the time and the mental bandwidth and emotional bandwidth to like really explore it. And that's okay. And so I
Yeah.
think it's okay to like give yourself a little grace. And like sometimes I feel like we can have all these like big ambitions in our heart and these dreams. And it doesn't mean that they're not going to happen. It just might not be time yet. And you
Yep.
might be doing other things in your life that are laying the foundation. So I feel like that's the big thing is just like be patient with yourself. And when the right time comes, it almost might like hit you over the head with like how obvious it is. And
Yeah.
then you should take it and not sit on it.
Oh, I love that. It'll knock on your door when the time is right.
Yeah.
What do you hope that anybody who's listening takes away from this conversation that we're sharing?
If anybody who is listening who wants to be a writer or like something similar, I would say keep in mind that you don't have to write the great American novel. I feel like that was a big realization for me, especially coming out
Yeah.
of college and, reading all these classics, which are amazing and I love them. But once I kind of took a minute and I looked around at like the books we were covering at work or the books that I would see in bookstores and at airports and the books that my friends and I would read in book club, I was like, like I feel like I could write a book like this. And so I think whatever it is, if it's your art or your passion, like, you know, you don't have to be so like almost highbrow about it, if that makes sense. For me, like writing what I know and kind of like leaning on, where I'm from and kind of like experiences I've had, and then kind of like creating a fictional plot from there worked really well. And I think that once I kind of took the pressure off writing something like this book is like the least pretentious thing I've ever written. And I've tried to write other things that I thought were so smart. This is what got published. And this book is like, I've been told is like a warm hug and it will make you like swoon and giggle and kick your feet. And it's not some highbrow piece of like a literary masterpiece, but I think this is the kind of thing that like people want. And so, don't look down on something that you want to do or think that it, maybe it's not good enough. It definitely it might be good enough.
Oh, I love this. And you have to come back and talk to us about book 2. Before I let you go, I think we should do a little have a great summer rapid fire
Let's do it.
activity.
We're going to do a little game.
Go to Boardwalk snack order.
Ooh, I would say you got to get a soft serve ice cream cone. You got to get a twist with rainbow sprinkles.
Yum. Okay, song that instantly transports you back to 2009.
Oh my gosh. I would say Thunder by Boys Like Girls. That song,
So good.
Your voice is the soundtrack of my summer. That
So on point.
That whole album just takes me right back to my room.
Okay, must-have item in your beach bag.
Ooh, a book.
Oh, good answer.
A beach read.
Ultimate 2000s rom-com.
Oh my gosh, it's so hard to pick. I gotta say, one of my favorites is How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days.
It's unbeatable.
It's just so good. And that yellow dress, like one of the most iconic rom-com outfits ever.
And whenever I see somebody in a yellow dress that's even close,
100%.
it's where my mind goes.
We're the same.
Yeah, we are. Okay, person you would die to see reading Have a Great Summer on the Beach.
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. I'm gonna say Jenna.
Ooh, we can put it out there. We're big manifestors.
I know she has a copy. I gave her a copy.
We'll put it out there. Summer's in full swing. Now's the time.
Exactly.
I love it. Well, Francesca, I'm so grateful to you for taking time out of your busy weekend at an exceptionally active time for you.
Oh my gosh,
thank
thank you so much for having me. This was so fun. I'm so happy we were able to do this, and I really appreciate it. You've been such a great friend and a great coworker, and like all your support has meant so much to me. So yeah, I'm so happy I got to do this, and I also have loved seeing you shine on this podcast. It's so fun.
Oh, thank you. All the same is true for me about you. So I'm grateful, and I will see you in 30 Rock this week.
Yep. I'll see you soon. Thanks so much, Kels. Hi, I'm Francesca Cocchi, and I hope listeners leave this podcast feeling 30, flirty, and nostalgic.